You got to love it here in the city. Our hearts beat stronger.
Free socks.
The NHL playoff picture is still up in the air, but here in Winnipeg, fans are confident the arena will echo with the sound of white noise again.
Free socks.
Let's go! Go, Jets, go!
Winnipeg is back in the big leagues and over the moon.
Welcome back to the landing strip after dark, presented by From Financial after a real struggle to get through that one tonight against the Vancouver Canucks as the Winnipeg Jets dropped this 6-2 with an empty netter. I guess let's get into it. Mikey, how you doing this evening, buddy?
I'm awake. I'm not sure I want to be awake after that game, but I'm awake, man. That was rough. That was definitely rough tonight. No celebratory Squirtle. Not on this one.
Oh, looks like we're getting some echo. Oh, Choice of TK says it's good now.
Awesome. Thanks.
Tico and Apolli's in the chat as well. We appreciate you guys being here this late. And I think Choices puts it a good way. Sloppy. This was a weird one for the Jets. What's your big takeaway coming out of this one?
I don't know if the Jets realized they had a game tonight and nobody told them until right before they showed up. But it didn't look like anybody was interested in playing a game tonight. That was real bad on the Jets' part. Vancouver they outskated them, they out-hustled them. They were better on the puck, they were better away from the puck. It was a bad game. But honestly, I feel like this is just one of those ones you can throw in the trash can. You can just toss this game away, forget it. It never happened, and hopefully move on. And as long as it doesn't happen again, you know what I mean? I'm willing to do that, but that was one of the worst games I've seen them play. It was just bad. Everything that is in the book on how to beat the Jets, the Vancouver Canucks tonight decided to read it up and went, yeah, we're gonna do that.
Yeah, T-Coney Pauly puts it, even Squirtle needs some time to rest. There will be no sack Squirtle celebratory after that one. It's interesting because the first half of this game, I thought the Jets had some good things going. And Vancouver was they buried their chances, whereas Winnipeg didn't. Kevin Lankinen makes a few big saves through the halfway point. Not so much the same for Connor Hellebuyck on this night.
Yeah.
And just when it seemed like the Jets were going to make a push back in that second period, we see Arneal finally make a switch from that Lowry line, which we've talked about. Struggling the last little bit. We see Lowry and Barron swapped, and they get some results out of it. Lowry and Tanev go to work on the forecheck, get it up to the point. Sandberg gets it to Shen, and who rips a shot through, and IFL puts it in, and it's all of a sudden a 3-2 hockey game. Shen gets his first of the year. That new look line gets on the board immediately. And then this game just ends with that casual attempt at a cover from Connor Hellebuyck that Brock Besser puts in, making it a 4-2 game. Then they get sloppy behind their net. DeBrus bumps DeMello. Mark Scheifele's chasing nobody and then misses his guy net front. And this one goes 5-2, and it's just silent from there. It's a weird one for me. It seems like Vancouver buried all their chances early. Some rough goaltending, I think you're going to be talking about, some rough stuff up the middle. Vancouver really exploited that thing we talked about with teams with speed in transition, really being able to take advantage of this team. But they buried on most of their opportunities, and the Jets couldn't buy. Kyle Connor has that open net early, shoots it back into Kevin Lankinen in game 600 for Kyle Connor. Big milestone for the guy. There was a couple looks with Kevin Lankinen gets backdoor on Mark Scheifele, who drives the net for that rebound.
Yep.
And it felt like one of those games.
Well.
Yeah, Cole Perfetti beats two guys and drives to the net for that backdoor pad save. So it felt like the Jets were in this one until that big error from Connor Hellebuyck, and it felt like that was the game, and it felt like the Jets knew it as the foot came off the gas. But I'm having a little bit of trouble just because of what we saw from the first half, beating it up too much. I don't. It's a weird one for me. It really is.
If you want any more evidence that Connor Hellebuck is the most valuable player to this team, here's a great example of an off night for Hellebuck, everything around him implodes. Right, the rest of the thing just falls apart when Hellebuck isn't part of the equation. So yeah, it feels like one of those games where, like I said, you toss this one in the trash, you try to move on from it, and you just hope that this isn't a reoccurrence. Because if it's a one-off where, yeah, Hellebuck had an off night for whatever reason, everybody around him was just fumbling a little bit, but like you said, they still had some chances. They potentially could have been in it. They just couldn't capitalize on them. And when Hellebuck isn't on fire, it's pretty evident.
Common theme between YouTube and Twitch between Tico and Apolly and Choices TK. Choices TK here, where Choices says those teams played like the standings. One team needed it and one team did it, and it showed. And Tico and Apolly said the Jets had moments, but I don't think their hearts were ever really into this game. And I think those are two summaries when you look at the urgency in this one.
Yep.
Especially as that game tightened up and got closer, you could tell Vancouver did want it more. They were more aggressive on their checks. They were more aggressive on the forecheck. They were quicker in transition, and they really did feel one step ahead. And this was a rare one where a pretty opportunistic Jets team at times just didn't bury the ones they did have to kind of keep this a game. So I do think those were fair takeaways from both Tico and Apolly and Choices on just the urgency and the difference between the two teams on their commitment to the details in this game. And in the end, that's the difference in the game, and it looks like a 6-2 hockey game as this thing goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. It just, yeah, I'm kind of leaning more towards what Turd Ferguson on YouTube is saying. Turd Ferguson says, I've seen some saying they thought the Jets were good. I thought they were sloppy and discombobulated for much of the game. And that's the side I fall down, a little bit more into. But like I said, yeah, I'm willing to toss this one away and hope that because again, right, this is a late game for the Jets. They're not used to playing this late every game now. So I'm willing to toss it up too. It's a break in the routine. It was just a rough night, and hopefully, yeah, we can move on and keep it going because. Yeah, Vancouver they're pulling for it right now, right? They need to get in. They need all of these points. And the Jets look like a team that is in the middle of or towards the end of a long season that they've almost got wrapped up. So, yeah, it was kind of evident that this may have just been an off night for the boys.
And speaking of discombobulated and sloppy, Nino Niederreiter. Like that whole line was honestly terrible, especially in that first period. And this is where I do get a little mixed on it, because in that first period, it seemed like the second line would put together a shift. The fourth line would put together a shift. And the top line would get out there, and they weren't bearing. And then you'd send out that third line, and it would end up the other way. And it felt like that a lot early in this game. That line was a big problem on this night. And I kind of tweeted about it after the first, that line needed a shot in the arm. And obviously, as you'd expect, a lot of Mason Appleton criticism. And it's fair. We've talked about Mason Appleton. He's a guy that we've wanted to see upgraded on that line. But I thought this was a real bad showing by Nino. One of those games, too, he drives the net looking for his first goal in, 14 games now. Yeah. Runs into the goalie, and it goes the other way on that 3-on-2. Where really, I thought that was a real tough look on Fleury, who, again, I thought that third pair had another tough night for the Winnipeg Jets. Fleury kind of just backs in and doesn't get into that cross-ice seam lane, and Hughes puts it on a platter for that one-timer goal. And then right at the end of that period in a 2-1 hockey game, Nino gets it just over the defensive blue line and sends a completely errant backhand sauce-type sloppy pass to the middle. Vancouver regroups, and then kind of what we're talking about, they regroup with speed and make the Jets look stupid on transition to put this one 3-1 going into the intermission. And it was just like one of those, holy shit, how did this happen? Like, we had control. Period was coming to an end. And you give up such a sloppy play. And we kind of talked about Perfetti's goal last game, potentially bringing the team back into it. That was one of those that just kills you because you go into that period 2-1, you make that switch up, you get that second goal. We're talking about a totally different game, but just a real. I think Arc signing kind of nails it. Worst Nino game as a Jet? Question mark. I had a real tough time with our boy Nino.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point now where it's not even the 14 game goalless drought. That's fine. It's not fine, but you can still be doing good things and not score. Tonight was just a bad game overall for Nino Ryder. I still believe he can turn it around. I still think he can be a productive member on that third line. They just got to figure out a way to get his game going right now. And like I said last game, I don't know if it's a nagging injury that he's carrying around and doesn't want to sit out for, or if it's just something else. But yeah, something's real off right now with Nino, and I still think they'll be able to figure it out. He's done it before, and I'm not too super worried yet, but 100%, this is the worst game he's played as a Jet for sure.
And it was interesting. Obviously, something we've been a little bit critical with the coaching staff is just how long the leash can kind of go. And I want to give credit to them today for being done after that first period. It was the type of period that was embarrassing, and it immediately paid dividends. If you want to look for something to be happy about coming out of this one, that line of Iafallo, Lowry, and Brandon Tanev in just under 7 minutes of 5-on-5 time together outshoots the opposition 9-1, wins the goal battle 1-0, and outchanced their opposition 4-0. Gave them a little boost in that third line after that third line we've been talking about has been really struggling. That was a nice look from the group, actually, after the switch was made. What'd you see from that group today, and what'd you think of it?
It's funny. People have been asking if we were going to see Lowry play maybe with those guys at some point, and this isn't the way you want that to happen. But it was interesting that they had such an immediate impact as a group playing back together. So I don't know if I would if I'd put too much stock into it in a long-term solution, but if in the short term you can get a little bit of production, a little bit, at least getting the little things right in their game again. I don't hate it as a short-term thing to try out, but I don't want to see that long-term.
Ticona Pauly's ready for a new Disney hit movie called Finding Nino.
And I think we just found the name of the episode, so thanks, Ticona Pauly.
Yeah, there we go. We need to get creative for these episode titles. I like that one, Finding Nino from Ticona Pauly, who make a little announcement today. We're still just getting the details finalized, but Ticona Pauly helping out the boys. It looks like we're going to have a watch party and live podcast at the beginning of April at Dal's Restaurant. So if that's something you're interested in, give me a shout. We're gonna get this finalized and make a more formal announcement on it. But I want to thank Ticona Pauly for putting in the legwork for the fellas there, and now naming the titles of our podcasts. What a contributor Ticona's becoming for the boys.
All-star right there, Ticona.
DB204 too. I do think this is important because it's not just a game where the Jets didn't show up for. Like I said, I thought they had chances, and Kevin Lankinen comes up big. DB204 says, give kudos to the Canucks. They were playing fast all night, and we know that is the Achilles heel. When teams are able to play with speed in the neutral zone, that's when things do start to come undone for this Winnipeg Jets team. We talk about it on the show often, that controlling the neutral zone and slowing down teams is a big piece of this team's identity for when they're winning hockey games. He also points out Lanky made some big saves, and I thought Lanky versus Hellebuck was the difference through the first half of this game. Yeah. I thought the foot came off the gas for any kind of push as this game went on, but Lanky did really keep that game tight. He also says Hughes was in top form, and I gotta say, during all this Hart debate, I've kind of openly been talking about the idea that Hellebuck and Leon Draisaitl are my runaway two right now. I think the best case in a mixed field for number 3 is Quinn Hughes. You see the numbers for the Vancouver Canucks when he's on the ice versus off of them. Yeah. You saw him on a night like tonight where he is really pushing the envelope for that team. He's jumping into the plays. He's making defensive stops. I got the hot take that I do think Quinn Hughes is better than Cale Makar, and that might not be popular, but I thought that was on display tonight, that he was their man. He was a stud. And yeah, Vancouver looked like the team pushing for a playoff spot in a desperate race. And kind of how Choices TK puts it here, just a comedy of errors. Nino turnover, Connor misses basically an open net, Helly mishandle, whole team just seemed like they weren't focused. And on a night like this where the other team is playing for something, you're going to get caught with your hand in your pants sometimes. And it felt like the Jets did on this night, where they couldn't bring themselves back into it when they allowed such big mistakes to put them behind.
You ever seen Varsity Blues?
I have not. I got to say, when it
Never
comes
seen
to pop culture, I'm not your guy, I
That's
got to
a classic
say.
sports movie, though. That's one of the best football movies. But there's a
I'm gonna have
scene
to
in the
watch it
movie
now.
where the quarterback takes the team out to the strip club a couple counties over the night before one of the games, and they come back and they just kind of play like dog shit, for a game there. Kind of just feels like, everybody maybe enjoyed themselves too much during the day at a wine tasting and cheese event, and came into the game real full.
T. Will is sure in the fields tonight. I got to ask you, what do you think about our boy T. Will's comment? Someone tell the Jets the playoffs aren't for another month. They're not supposed to collapse yet. Are you feeling those vibes tonight?
I don't want your life. Thanks, turd. No, that's fine. They usually collapse after the All-Star break, so they're right in the middle. We're good, T-Well. They're on track.
I will say, too, it was very critical. I thought last game was one of Nick Ehlers' worst games. I thought he bounced back from that game really well. In a game like this that was so open, I thought we saw the best of Nick Ehlers tonight. Obviously, he creates that transition, passes to Vlad, and then finds himself open. Vlad gets it back to him, cuts to the middle of the ice with that change of speed that he is so good at, and finds the space in the middle of the ice to rip that first goal. Almost creates another one on a similar play that goes bar. I was actually pretty content with how that second line looked. This was another game I felt where you're seeing Cole Perfetti really control the puck and make his way in the offensive zone. I thought this was another step forward for that group. What'd you think of the second line in this one?
Yeah, real good bounce back from Nick Ehlers after what we talked about being maybe one of his worst games ever as a Winnipeg Jet. The goal itself was wonderful. We talked about Cole Perfetti's chance where he just disappears from a group of like 3 Canucks and just kind of blasts his way through. They continued to have a good night, doing just everything right at the moment, which, even if it doesn't translate to the score sheet sometimes for Perfetti, it's just another game where he's doing all the little things right. And the entry from Vlad and the pass to Ehlers on that goal was everything that you want from a guy that we've given a lot of criticism to before. So definitely a good night from the second line overall. And the continued emergence of Cole Perfetti is my favorite thing this season, man.
Favorite for me, it's still Sandberg, but also nice to see Luke Shen get on the board with his first a point.
shout out Luke
I
Shen.
thought that pair was pretty solid in this game. For me, the big standouts in this one for me on the downside was the Nino Appleton duo. Hellebuck obviously not at his peak form, and the third pair continues to be a bit of an issue for Winnipeg. I see Big Papa stopped in to share his take before heading off. He said, "Gotta work in the morning. Have a great stream. A couple quick thoughts. Hope that they bring fire against Edmonton. Not worried about 62. He'll figure it out. 22 has no place on this team. Gus Bus, question mark. Wants to bring up Lambert. I can't say I'm quite there. I hope they leave that third line for now. They look decent, and I think that is a strong takeaway. I want to see if they start the next game with that group. But he wants to see Ville Heinola. Now, I don't think we're going to see that, but I do think after 2 rough games for that third pair, we might see Big Stan make his way back into this thing.
Yeah, I was surprised that they didn't make the jump right away during this last game. I was actually pleasantly surprised that they were giving Fleury at least a little bit of a run. It's funny. I agree. I'd like to see Heinola get some games. I don't think that's ever going to happen. So it's probably not worth even prognosticating.
Agreed. Agreed.
The skill set would have been nice with what we currently have. To try to find a fit there. But Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked to see Stanley come in for Fleury at some point here. I'd probably still them continue on with Fleury in that spot if the choice is just between Fleury and Stan. I'd probably still give Fleury another game before I make the jump back to Logan Stanley. We've seen that tape enough. I'm fine giving Fleury some more time on that pairing, especially since they aren't getting a shitload of minutes. I am curious what happens when Pionk comes back, though. That's my
Me
big,
as well.
that's my big question and big worry.
We keep seeing that the Dylan Sandberg effect is he could play with any right-handed D.
Yep.
And I am curious to see where that goes. Choices TK, we are going to briefly talk offer sheets towards the end of this show. It seems like Scott Westman and T. Kona are bonding over some of their preferred landing strip guests in another form over in the chat. Good to see the fellas bonding on this night. But even a frustrating one on the specialty team stay. Now, the 5-on-3 wasn't very long, but the power play wasn't as crisp as we normally see it, kind of laying credits to the idea that they just weren't mentally there today. The PK lets it open some big seams, and Quinn Hughes is going to take advantage of that. What a great one-timer and high tip. And it was interesting to hear Kevin Sawyer talking about how they were practicing that exact play against the Winnipeg Jets this morning. But because I do feel like the high tip is somewhere you could cause the Jets some havoc with their PK and how it covers the net front.
Yep.
Now, obviously not an easy play to pull off, but the Canucks pull it off to perfection. Brock Besser breaks a 12-game goalless streak with 2 goals in this one.
Punishing the team that should have traded for him.
Ooh, maybe he was the Lowry winger answer.
Right.
I still worry about that one, but what'd you think of the specialty teams on this night?
Yeah, we didn't get to see enough of the power play there for them to make a big impact, unfortunately. But yeah, it's the PK. I think I saw on socials there that this is the 3rd game in a row where one combination of 17 and 9 played an entire penalty kill, like the entire 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is interesting that they've gone to this really like individual heavy style for the PK with this current group. I don't know how I feel about that. It's
part of it's not getting clears though, right? They're getting hemmed into the zone for the whole PK and not able to establish clears,
but
which then opens up the tired shooting gallery.
I thought we just brought in 2 penalty kill specialists. This should be easy work. Why aren't we getting the puck out then, right? So it's
it's been a bit of a problem.
Yeah, it's a bit of a problem, and maybe you can just chalk it up to you've added in 2 new guys who aren't totally familiar with the system yet, right? So that's still kind of working out the kinks. But yeah, we're gonna have to get a little bit more. Yeah, choices. TK gets there even before I can, man. PK has been passive. We need to get more aggressive with it. Get back to that penalty kill kind of style that we were looking at earlier in the season. We had that stretch where you had the Scheifele and Connors out there penalty killing a little bit more than normal, and maybe it's time to start tapping them on the shoulders a bit as well to get them in there, because the penalty kill right now needs a boost. And yeah, I'll also stick by the Besser punishing the team that should have traded for him at the deadline.
DB204 asks a really good question here, and I think this all relates to especially the last 2 games with the third pair being virtually unusable. DB204 says 44 at 27 minutes. This coming after a game, the last game where he played 29. So we're looking at 58 minutes in those last 2 games. -3 on this night. Does Arnie need to reduce his ice to refresh him a bit? And this is where not having a third pair you could trust right now could hurt the Jets down the stretch, with Morrissey having to play such a big workload. I thought this was a tougher night for DeMello. We were talking about the Dallas Stars game. I thought that was DeMello, his best game, and I thought this was a game where you saw him struggle and put some pressure on that group on the back end. And 44 is your horse, and he's going to have to try and eat those minutes. But it is as the games get tougher, as we get closer to the playoffs, it is a concern for me, because I mean, this team is in such a great position right now that you could kind of not worry about a game like this, especially when the game's out of reach. What I found interesting about this one was that we didn't see him roll back on some of his big producers in a game that was out of reach. Nothing was really going. And I do wonder if that does bite them down the stretch if 44 has to keep carrying a workload like this.
Yeah, it definitely can, right? I the other half of it too is the bench gets short in the playoffs, so he's going to be playing a shitload regardless.
Mhm.
You're at the point now where you may need to start giving him a little bit of a break getting into the playoffs because he's going to be playing every goddamn minute of those games. And he was a -3 tonight, but like if you take a look at him and DeMello 5-on-5, like they still won their shot attempts, they still won their high danger chances, like they were still a good pairing overall. It just on a night where everybody was bad, I am willing to kind of just chalk this one up to tossing it in the trash. Um, but yeah, you can't have Morrissey play 30 minutes every game because once the playoffs hits, they're going to be asking him to do that a lot, I'm guessing.
And Choices TK puts it, game flow last couple of games hasn't helped protecting a lead and then chasing in another. They need a blowout win, and it doesn't look like one is on the horizon. If you just saw what the Edmonton Oilers did to Utah tonight, and that's the next opponent. The Oilers might have woken up tonight, and that could cause a bit of an issue for this decor come Thursday. I'm really curious to see how this Winnipeg Jets team bounces back against an Oilers team in Edmonton after this one. I also want to ask you this on the topic of reducing minutes here. We make a lot about Halley's workload, and I think it's going to be really hard to take games away from him down the stretch when he is chasing NHL history potentially. Tico Napoli says agreed with the reducing minutes. Halley shouldn't have started the third, and others could have had ice time cut. What did you think of Hellebuyck getting sent out there in the third period tonight in a game that was pretty much out of reach?
I was pretty surprised by it just because conventional wisdom in this type of situation, you don't expect your starter to go back out there for the third period in a blowout loss like that. I'd want to know, one, if it was his choice, like if he said to Scott Arniel, no, I want to go out there and finish the game. I'd be okay with it. If it's just Arniel being like, hey, go out there and keep taking them, I'm not a big fan of it. So I would, not a great answer, but yeah, if it's the goalie's choice because it's it's not like Eric Comrie would have given them a different opportunity to win by the time the third period rolled around. At that point, I think it was already in the bag. So
It's a weird one for me because I do think this is the game where Hellebuyck should wear some of this. Like, I don't think this is fully on the team in front of him. I thought he did struggle, especially like the casualness to go cover that puck really puts this game out of reach. So I could see this being a one like, hey, we're not bailing you out of this one. And then the other side of me is also like, hey, this could have been an opportunity to get him a little bit of extra rest. But in a team and human environment, I do wonder if that was a bit of a message, which, I mean, in a Hart season, it does seem a bit extreme to potentially do that. And maybe you're right. Maybe Hellebuyck said, you know what, I'm not having my best night, but I want to be out there with them.
Yep.
I do wonder about that one a bit, though, coming down the stretch here. Like the Morrissey minutes, I do wonder if that was an opportunity to lay off the Hellebuyck minutes. And Tico Napoli yells it. Then the coach has to go up there and tell him to have a seat. It's about resting Helly, not Comms getting the win. And I think that's a fair takeaway from Tico Napoli, too. I would have no issue with that.
Yeah, I agree, actually. He probably should have told him to take a seat at that point if we're focused more on getting him the rest as opposed to salvaging the game. That would have been the smarter choice. But I also won't fault a player in this type of situation who says, I still want to go out there and fight and put it out there because I still think I can do it. And if you're in the middle of a Hart potential season and you've been the Jets' best player most nights than not, you give them that benefit of the doubt sometimes. You give them that leash. So it's a hard line to walk. I've given Scott Arniel a lot of shit over the lineup management in general on relationships over results. This is one of the times where I don't fault it too much on the coach. If it was the player saying, no, I want to go out there and do it. I'll
say this.
I don't hate it.
I like DB's outlook on this 204, and this is where I kind of would fall because I think it could be a message both to the team, like it is telling if a number one goalie gets pulled in a game. Like DB says, and sometimes a goalie pull does light a fire under the rest of the team. And it could have lit a fire under Connor Hellebuyck going into that Edmonton game. And I do think ultimately that's where I do fall in this discussion. Obviously, I'm not in that room. I don't know what that conversation looked like.
Yeah.
But I tend to look at it the same way DB204 does here on that topic.
Yeah, that's very true as well. You definitely can really start to spike it up if they see that guy's getting pulled. That's the thing about this one. I don't see a negative on either one, right? Like you can convince me of both sides on this one. It's kind of right on the line for me. It's a real close. It's a tough situation, this one. I don't think Scott or Neil had an easy choice in either direction, to be honest.
I'm going to share a little tidbit from Ethan KPM on YouTube that I enjoy, and then we're going to get into our From Financial Face-Off. So in the chat, we want to hear your From Financial Face-Off with detail of the game. Do you think was the tipping point on this night? And I think this one could be a lot. It definitely could be something that's missing. It could be something you're going to credit to Vancouver. But Ethan KPM on the Besser stuff says, don't know what type of trade control Besser has, but he teed off behind him in BC when trade rumors were flying 2 years ago. I golf in full Jets regala and asked him if he'd wave. He said no, but Ethan also says, probably on me though. Ethan's our recruiter out in BC. We love to see it, Ethan. But let's go into the From Financial Face-Off here tonight.
All right, let's hit it.
And I'll start with you, Mikey. What was your From Financial Face-Off detail of the game in this one?
So tonight for me, it was the center of the ice. It was quite noticeable that the Vancouver Canucks read up on how to beat the Winnipeg Jets, and line number 2 in that book says, take away the center of the ice. If you take that away from the Jets and you push them out to the perimeter, it really, really limits them offensively. It takes away a lot of what they like to do. And it absolutely just kind of starts to stifle a lot of the offense for the Jets there. So Vancouver did a great job tonight. They were fast. They pushed the Jets, and they made sure to really take away the center of the ice, push everything out to the perimeter, and just make sure that those shots were coming through clear.
Yeah, they did do a pretty good job of really limiting or working to limit what the Jets were looking to create. And on the topic of center of the ice, I thought they did a really good job using speed through transition through the middle of the ice to create some of those odd man rushes and take advantage of a really sloppily played structure game in that aspect when it came from the Winnipeg Jets. So I do think you're right. Vancouver does deserve a lot of credit for doing some of the things that we know tends to be an Achilles heel for this Winnipeg Jets team. On this night, my From Financial Face-Off is the difference in goaltending. Despite the final score, I did think this game was a game halfway through it that could have went either way. Kevin Lankinen makes the saves he needed to do. He came up big in the net for Vancouver to keep the lead and allow them to build on it. And on this night, Connor Hellebuyck just wasn't the Connor Hellebuyck we're used to seeing, and that's going to happen over the course of the season. But I did think when this game could have become a tie game or this game could have swung in the Jets' momentum, Kevin Lankinen was there, and unfortunately, Hellebuyck fell flat when it came down the other way. So I'm going to go with goaltending and not in the way we're used to seeing around the Winnipeg Jets.
Yep.
So if you got a From Financial Face-Off, let us know. I don't know I know we announced a giveaway last show. We're going to do it on Sunday after the 2 p.m. game. I was watching back the show, and I'd seen some comments really talking about how late this one was, and it is true. I didn't pay attention to the schedule. I want to get everyone in here and give everybody that supports this program a chance. So after the 2 p.m. Sunday game, we're going to give away tickets to the March 30th game, which is also a Sunday afternoon versus this Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, if you want some added incentive to get in this chat and get on the phone lines to try and win, the one thing I'll say about the Winnipeg Jets, I do think they'll be motivated for that Sunday afternoon, and you could be in house to really give it out or watch them potentially give it back to this Vancouver Canucks team.
Absolutely. We'll get some revenge.
DB204, his from financial face-off detail is the hogliner goal with 2 seconds in the first. The old cliche on late goals, they kicked any momentum the Jets were gaining. And yeah, that like I talked early on, like that Nino turnover is just such a bad play from a veteran that you don't see make that play so often, and it opens up everything and puts this game out of reach before the first is even done. Just a frustrating string of events there to end the first. One of those where it's like, if we weren't doing this show, I might have just turned off the TV and went to bed pissed off. T. Konopali's from Financial Faceoff was JMO not being out long term. Obviously, we saw JMO miss some time in that game with apparent injury. He came back quick. We saw DeMello go head first and look like he was shaken up. It was not a fun game for potential injuries from the back end, but good to see everyone make it out of there healthy.
Yep.
Danica Smith, nice to see you in the chat, says the 3 best offensive players today were Fetz, Ehlers, and Shen. In the second half of the game, Shen and Morrissey switched roles. Josh was hitting and Luke was shooting. And I did like to see that Josh in a game where obviously he's frustrated. We talked about the -3. He's probably upset with how that game's going. Throw that big open ice hit. And then you immediately see Lowry and who was his partner on that shift? I think it was Colin Miller. It was one of those plays where everyone expected a fight, and Dakota Joshua looked like he was thinking about it. And Lowry and Miller give up on the play, ready to do it, and no gloves come off. Everyone moves forward. But the type of old-fashioned open ice hit you like to see from 44 to kind of let out some of that frustration in this game.
Yeah, it was wonderful to watch, and you definitely could see them being like, all right, so are we gonna do this? And oh no, never mind. Oops, oh, is my shoe untied? Like that was. Yeah, that was real good because I don't think you don't want to be throwing them with those two guys.
Choices TK also points out the March 30th game is Jersey off our back night as well. So hey, maybe you go to the game on us, and you might even get lucky that you're chosen for that. So hey, if you're listening to this tonight, be sure you're in the chat on Sunday. If you're listening to this the next morning, like I imagine most of our audience smartly is doing and getting their beauty sleep, make sure you're there Sunday as we look to do another giveaway to send you to the March 30th game versus Vancouver. On this one, I don't know if we're going to go the full hour tonight. This was just one of those frustrating ones, but Choices TK brought up something earlier that I found interesting this afternoon. And it was about offer sheets. And Ray Ferraro and Darren Drager today on their podcast were talking about the idea. All right, this came from Drager, where he said an unnamed Canadian GM who's had some traction or has had some trouble gaining traction is looking at the offer sheet market this summer after the success of the St. Louis Blues with the Broberg and Holloway thing. And you can't help but wonder when it's coming from Drager, and the Winnipeg Jets have some trouble with traction in trades, if they are one of those teams looking to poke around the edges of the offer sheet market, a market that the Winnipeg Jets probably shouldn't try to exploit. Now, they only have their first and their third. Yep. So any kind of offer sheet right now that would need a second-round pick, they would not be eligible for. But they could still, for a first and a third, get someone in that 4.5 to 6.5 range, if I'm not mistaken. Is that an avenue you could see the Jets pursuing? I know it hasn't been in their DNA, though offer sheets in general around the league have been kind of taboo. But it seems like with the success in St. Louis, who is hot, and I do wonder if I do wonder if we overlook them in the talk of who the toughest matchup might be in the first round. It might be the St. Louis Blues, who have top 5 underlying metrics since the coaching change, and big game Benner. Is that something you think might be referencing the Winnipeg Jets in their approach this summer?
So because it's coming from Drager, that was the only real reason that it made me kind of jump at it and go, oh, shit, okay. And even just the way that he phrased it, right? It kind of felt like that it was, Chevy could fall potentially into that category. It was definitely a possibility. So first off, yeah, you're right. That's the 4.5 to 6.8 range, the first and the third. Or there's the 11.4 the 11.4 and above, which is 4 firsts. We could still technically do that one as well if we want to go real big with somebody. The only thing with looking at, so especially offer sheets in the NHL have been real taboo. The GMs look at it as, they look at it as a slight. They look at it as you're stealing our guy, you're underhanded, you're going behind our back, which I personally don't agree. It's in the fucking rules. It's in the CBA. You should just do it. It doesn't fucking make sense to just not do it because of a gentlemanly agreement. Fuck it, you're all trying to win. That should be the focus, not trying to be the most gentlemanly GM. There's no Lady Bing for you guys to go and get. So they should be exploring it. I doubt they will be. Chevy doesn't seem to have the demeanor to want to rock the boat when it comes to the other GMs in the league. Now, maybe if he's feeling a little ornery after getting played at the deadline with guys being dangled, hey, maybe he's, going into his dark Chevy era. Maybe he's, going to be hitting the gym and, pumping some iron and, getting ready for revenge. Again, I have a hard time seeing it, especially with an organization like with St. Louis, for example, right? We talk about the Blues have some targets there. I mean, that's an organization he's made a big trade with in the past. He seems to have a good relationship with. Is he going to want to sour that? Maybe, maybe not. Hard for me to see him, really making that switch. But
it's not St. Louis I'm looking at here.
Who are you looking at?
And I like how Tikona Pauly puts this. Yes, why not? Jets need to play sort of dirty off-season moves. Are they gentlemanly when it comes to trading to the Jets? No. And Tracy TK also points out it could be Patrick Alvin as well, considering the offers they got for Besser and Miller. I will say this. What intrigued me about that talk, obviously coming from Drager, obviously we know the no trade clause problem with Winnipeg. That is the age group that can't have clauses. And you just look at how this deadline played out. The Jets didn't move off any of their first or thirds. They kept their farm intact, and they are one of the teams that does have a bulk of the cap space going into the summer. If I'm not mistaken, the Jets might even have the most cap space at around 40 mil this summer. And I think there's two discussions to be had with the offer sheets. One is I think part of why teams haven't used them so much is because everyone gets so sucked into the idea of it being a star player that you should be using an offer sheet from. And I think this is where everyone's kind of gotten it wrong. Because when you look at the contract you'd have to pay someone to get their team to move off of them, and then you're giving up 4 unprotected first-round picks, and you're spending max value on this guy. So you're not getting the contract value you'd expect. So when you look at it just from a value asset-wise, I do think like the higher priced RFAs aren't necessarily reasonable just because you're not getting cap savings really if you're going to force a team off of them and you're giving up 4 unprotected firsts. I think what St. Louis exposed this year is that the sweet spot for offer sheets are spending a little extra for those middle of the lineup guys that have potential and are still young, overspending on them early, which convinces a young player, hey, maybe I want to leave. I'm going to get guaranteed money over here. And that's where like, obviously, the Jets have trouble getting people to sign, but if you're approaching a 23-year-old with more money, and in the case of Broberg and Holloway, we're talking double to triple what Edmonton was able to do for them. Yep. That becomes interesting even for a team in Winnipeg because at the end of the day, this is a career, this is a job. If you're going big, obviously you want to do the whole Bouchard thing and really try and mess Edmonton up. But again, I think the sweet spot is that mid-tier of player. And the guys I'm looking at in this are potentially centers. If you want to do this in Winnipeg, you want to find a center. I'm looking at a Ryan McLeod again in Buffalo. I know I talked a lot about him in lead up to the deadline, but they have a ton of RFAs they're going to have to make some decisions with. There's a lot of talk around JJ Peterka. I'm going to throw 2 interesting ones at you here, though, that I do wonder about in this, and they're both screwing a division rival a little bit here. Marco Rossi's name's come up a few times in the last couple of years because Bill Guerin doesn't seem to be convinced with his size. Is there a number where you scare Bill Guerin, especially coming off of their cap issues, off of a Marco Rossi, and that answers your 2C hole for the next little bit? He went 1 pick before Cole Perfetti. He's a player, honestly, I do believe can be a really good 2C in this league, and we're seeing a bit of a step forward from him. The other one I find really interesting in this is in Dallas, actually. And we know Dallas is starting to pay their guys. They still have the Sagan and Ben contracts. I think a guy like Maverick Bourque makes a lot of sense to approach the same way St. Louis approached the Holloway and Broberg thing. And that's the name I'm kind of thinking about here.
Interesting. That's, yeah. I don't know if the Marco Rossi one would be real tough. You'd have to find, especially because it's a division rival, they're going to really want to match almost anything that you throw at them. Now you run that risk of how far can we push it up to try to force them to match into a bad contract before we end up just taking the bad contract and he just signs with ours, right? That's a game of chicken that would be interesting, because if you can get that to hit, yeah, all day long. Marco Rossi is a perfect fit. That was a guy I was looking at the year that we drafted Perfetti, and if he hadn't gone right beforehand, that was one I was really hoping. We talked a lot about it that night, I remember. So yeah, that's one I'd be real interested in.
Yeah, we'll see. It was just an interesting tidbit that came up today, and I find the Jets to be in a really interesting spot if Kevin Cheveldayoff does come out of that deadline frustrated with getting kind of leveraged in some situations, and he decides to throw a little bit of extra money. And the one thing too about this is we know the Jets haven't been scared to overpay a little bit to take on somebody. I mean, we've seen it with Nate Schmidt. We've seen it with some of the contracts they've brought in. And it is an interesting spot where you're getting a prime age player, which I'd prefer over an older guy. So interesting tidbit. I'm glad we got to have a little discussion on it. And the one name I really do wonder about in this is Mav Bourque in Dallas, just looking at their cap situation and what he could potentially do.
What do you think you could
as he
offer
continues to grow? What's that?
Well, what do you think you could offer him in a contract?
I guess it would have to be.
You know, that's a tough one.
That's a tough one, and I mean Broberg looked like an overpay at 4.5, and he's kind of broken out.
Yep.
Holloway, I mean that was I thought that was the one Edmonton was going to keep, and they look like idiots right now for not.
Yep.
So I think you're looking at something in that 4.5 range just to like get it over the line, and you're hoping he grows into that. Just an interesting thing kind of that came up today.
How about for Rossi?
I think you go to the upper limits of that range of the first and the third.
Right.
And you wonder if, especially with the history of
right for Rossi,
6.5,
6.5,
especially with the idea that Guerin's not necessarily sold on him. Maybe he wants to flip a first and a third for a center he's more interested in. Who knows?
Yeah.
DB204 throws an interesting one. This is another player that's been on the rocks with his coaching staff after being a really high draft pick for the team. Mason McTavish in Anaheim. Now, Anaheim has the cap room to kind of keep that group together, but Cronin has not seen Mason McTavish as the level of player that Verbeek drafted him to be, and that's a really interesting one, TB.
Yeah, I hadn't considered McTavish. That's yeah. Although, I don't know if they'd be as pressed to want to move him for space. They should be able to still sign him, and I think they're still high on him there, aren't they? Or is he kind of fallen out?
I believe the management team is, but the head coach sure isn't, the way he's used and talked about him in the media this year.
That's fair. Coaches come and go a little more though than 22-year-old centers.
Absolutely, but it was definitely
I like that.
Definitely
idea,
an interesting tidbit. Definitely an interesting idea, and I think if you were going to do it, it would be a center and try to fix that hole. Yeah. We'll see where this all goes. This could be us just talking content at this point, but it was really interesting when you just kind of piece together.
You've got me dreaming now of Rossi playing with Perfetti. That's all I can think about at the moment.
Turd Ferguson says, Nick, what about pinching Big Nick Hague out of Vegas? I just don't see the need to be doing that with Sandberg and Morrissey on the left side.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got Sandberg and Morrissey already there. You're going to add a third real big contract on that left-hand side is for a pairing that's going to play 12 minutes. I don't know. I like the idea, though.
Yeah, great discussion tonight. You know, it's late. Let's get into the 3 stars and get out of here. Who do you got in this one, Mikey?
All right. So with a 4-point night, Christian Dvorak, he's a 3rd star. Second star, Sam Montembeault with his 7-0-1 in his last 8 starts as the Montreal Canadiens beat the Ottawa Senators 6-3 and move into the second wild card spot. Thank you very much. And number 1 star, Nick Ehlers. He had a good bounce back game. The rest of the Jets were terrible.
I'm gonna give.
And I can't make Perfetti my number 1 every week, so.
That's fair. I'll give Ehlers the 3rd star in this one. I'm gonna go Vancouver the rest of the way. Even giving it to Ehlers is generous. You know what? I'm going all Vancouver.
There you go.
We're going Kevin Lankinen 3rd star, Brock Besser 2nd, and Quinn Hughes 1st. Thank you to the late night crowd for tuning in. Be a friend, tell a friend. Let's all get to bed so we're not too miserable tomorrow morning after we had to sit through that one.
Right on. Good night, everybody.